Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Abundant Thinking. Today, we're going to do something just a little bit different. We are going to have an episode that's a throwback, an episode I've already recorded, I've already had the conversation for, and some of you may have already seen. I had a moment of realization. I've gained a lot of new viewers over the past couple of months, and some of them might not have seen certain clips, certain parts of my podcast that I'm very proud of, and conversations that I know are invaluable to me and will be invaluable to you. With that being said, today, we are going to have an episode where I talk to Suneel Gupta. Now, I've already had this conversation with him before. If you scroll down on my podcast episodes, you can see I've already uploaded this, but I think this is a great way to show the new people what they have already missed. If this is something that interests you guys, I have a link to the actual podcast episode, the original one, so you can see the episodes around it as well. If you think episode 101 is interesting with Haley Perlis, maybe you'll think episode 103 is interesting, or maybe episode 65, who knows. But I wanted this to be an opportunity for you guys to maybe see this conversation I've already had and gain new value from it. I want to give the new viewers an opportunity to see this episode that they might not have. This episode that I had with Suneel Gupta completely changed my life. The way that he acted, the way that he responded was absolutely amazing. I've spoken to him a lot of times before already. I have his book signed over there in the corner. He is incredible. And I think more of you guys deserve to see this episode, and that is why that's what this episode is all about. Really quickly, if you haven't already, get a copy of my new book, Talk Deeper. This book has 8 chapters, 80 pages, and it's all about turning everyday conversations into life-changing connections. I'm not talking about LinkedIn connections. I'm talking about connections you can have with many different types of people. Friendships, relationships, doesn't matter. It doesn't stop anywhere. You can't draw the line. This book, I know, is going to help thousands and thousands of people's lives. So why don't you be part of that cohort? If you go onto my website, it's linked down below. You can get a copy, whether it's physical from Amazon, ebook, which is digital, or listen to it on Audible if you're more of an audiobook kind of person. Nonetheless, all the options are going to be down in the description for you to click from my website. I urge you guys to buy it, especially if you're somebody who sees my conversations and thinks, wow, he's really good at talking to people. He's a good communicator. He's good at asking questions. Everything that I have ever learned, I have put into this book. It has been meticulously created to help you build actual connection with people. But nonetheless, get the book in my show notes, and let's get into this episode. Suneel, I can imagine that there might be some people listening to this right now who may be at the lowest point of their lives. Maybe they failed at the thing that they once thought would get them where they wanted to go. Maybe they are having a hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. You are one of the best testimonies of overcoming failure. I wanted you to talk to me about the New York Times article written on failure with your face on it.
Yeah. So I had started a couple of companies that didn't work. I had been part of another company that you might be familiar with called Groupon. And Groupon had its sort of moment where we went from baby startup when I joined to big public company. We were named the fastest growing company of all time. And then we imploded. We lost about 85% of our market value within 1 year, billions and billions of dollars, and never came back. So it was one of the epic sort of crash and burn stories of all time, and I was part of that ride. And so the New York Times ends up doing an article on people who fail, and my face is the cover of that article. Now, it's funny because my friends would joke about, they would give me a hard time about it, and we'd make fun of it. But I got to be honest with you, like at the time, I really felt it. I felt like I was an embarrassment. I was a disappointment. I'd spent a lot of my career, I think, like a lot of people, trying to establish myself as a successful person, to be perceived as successful. And now the entire world, if you looked up my name on Google, the first thing that would come up would be my laundry list of failures. And so it was a disappointing moment for me, but a mentor of mine gave me a piece of advice. And the piece of advice that she gave me was that long-term success comes from short-term embarrassment. If you can do something with it, if you can learn something from it, these failures, they're there to be stepping stones. If we can choose to take those steps. So the step that I took was I started to send this article out to people that I admired, all these people who, I didn't know, but I would literally send them a link to this article and I'd say, hey, would you be willing to give me some advice? I clearly don't know what I'm doing. And I sent this article out to Oscar-winning filmmakers, celebrity chefs, coaches of professional sports teams, leaders of large iconic companies. And to my surprise, they said yes. I'll talk to you. And I think part of the reason for that, honestly, Elon, is because I was not approaching them with this sort of idea of, hey, I made it and I just want to connect with you. It was more kind of like, hey, look at this. I'm the poster child for failure. Um, can we chat? And I think it was that vulnerability that really ended up sort of creating a form of connection. And each of those conversations, I started to write down what I was learning. And after a while, I started to realize that the things that I was learning in these conversations were not the things that I was reading inside books. They were not the things I learned when I was in college. And so I started to write about it. And eventually those, paragraphs turned into articles. Eventually those articles turned into books. And it kind of put me on this path that I'm on right now. So this article that started out as an embarrassment kind of led me to where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that so much. And when you were in that, I guess, hard moment of your life, right? When Groupon was tanking and you were again the poster child of failure, what made you keep going? Because I can see a lot of people, when they're hitting that low, just give up and not think to themselves, I want to dig myself out of this hole, but kind of feel sorry for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there are two ways to, I think, measure your life, and I didn't realize this until I think probably later in the game than I wish I would have. There's what you accomplish, and there's how you grow, and both are really really important, right? It's not to say that accomplishments don't matter. They do. And if you're after something, you should want that thing bad enough that you want to try to achieve it. However, the game of life is always going to be hits and misses, no matter what. And if you are somebody whose only measure of success is the achievements, well, then that tank runs out of gas very, very quickly. So the other tank of gas is how you grow, right? And are you growing along the way? And the beautiful thing about that is that the misses oftentimes teach you more than the hits. When I sat down with Bill Gates, for example, one of the things he said to me that I'll never forget is that success is a lousy teacher, right? Success is wonderful, but it's actually not a very good teacher. And the interesting thing is, if you look at the ride on Groupon, we had this, massive ascent. We went from, less than $1 million valuation to multiple $1 billion valuation. Then we kind of crashed again, right? But if you look at that ascent and that descent, I probably learned a lot more in the descent than I did in the ascent. In the ascent, I was just trying to like hold on for dear life. But it was the descent where it was kind of like, you're showing up to work every day. Things are not going well. I'm trying to lead a team. People are leaving. I'm feeling terrible. And we still got to get through this. Like we still got to do our work. We still got to make things happen. I learned a lot from that experience, right? And so, again, if you're willing to use and measure your life in a way that's not just about achievement, but that is about growth, well, then all of a sudden, these moments that aren't necessarily going your way, can sometimes be the moments that are the most valuable in your life.
Sure. Yeah, I know this pertains to something you said on Kevin Ross's podcast. You mentioned how if somebody's goal is to just succeed, the losses feel like they hit so much harder. If you're constantly like thinking, all I want is for this thing to work, all I want for it just to work, and then it doesn't work, you're like, dang, like it's a hit against my character. And something
Yeah.
you mentioned, which I thought was very interesting, is instead of building something where you want it to succeed, build something over, first of all, like you mentioned, Dharma, passion, all that, but also consistency over time and failing, like knowing that failure, that thing is okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people hear the notions cliche that, failure is growth, like failure, you're learning. But for people who might want to see a little bit of a metric, how can people know that their failures are going to eventually like hit this higher goal? You know what I mean? Because when you're failing, when you're at the lowest points of your life, when your Groupon wasn't working, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel where you
Yeah.
say, you know what? It's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard in the moment. It's hard in the moment, and I think one thing I've learned to do is not deny the fact that it is hard. right? So I think sometimes it is possible to be too optimistic or too positive, because I think sometimes when we do that, we are in inadvertently resisting the pain. And I think the more you resist the pain, the more the pain grows in size. There's this saying of what you resist persists, right? And so if something sucks, you just got rejected. You really wanted a job and you got rejected for it. I don't think that the right answer is to sort of deny that pain or to deny that sucks, right? So you need to give yourself the moment to do that. But then uh, we move on, right? Then we start to think about, all right, okay, what is next? And I think when we start to feel that pain fully, that's when it allows itself to heal so that we can actually then go take that next step. So, again, I've made the mistake of sort of trying to be too positive through these moments of pain. And when that happened, I found myself getting blindsided by just the sheer overwhelming kind of force of it all, right? It would flatten me. But if I could, journaling has been a big part of my practice for years now. And I would just take all the stuff that I was upset about, all the stuff that wasn't going my way, and I would acknowledge it. And I would write about it. I'd put it down on paper, and I'd say, oftentimes I'd be like, this sucks. This is not what I had in mind, and it sucks. But I think just by acknowledging that, I was able to move through it. And when you move through it, that's when you start to realize that, hey, like, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I'm also coming out of this stuff a lot smarter than I was before, a lot stronger than I was before. And there's something magical about that. One thing I've learned, Elon, is that growth is not a set of steps. We sort of look at growth as like you're going to take one step and take another step. It's actually much more in the form of cycles, right? So you are sort of you're gaining like traction, and then all of a sudden you lose it, right? And then you're gaining traction, then you lose it again, right? And that doesn't sound like it would be a lot of fun, but the truth is that every time you cycle, you get stronger, you get wiser, you start to understand yourself a little bit more. And so what I've kind of realized is that those cycles are really the name of the game. And if you sort of see the world that way, then all of a sudden these setbacks, they don't feel like something extraordinary that's happened to you. They just kind of really feel like they're more part of the process.
I love that. Suneel, would you say that like during these, cycles, maybe when you're not growing as much as you want to be, things are a little bit slower, it's more about risk aversion, like not causing yourself more harm as opposed to making more growth?
Yeah, I do. I think that we tend to wait in life for the perfect moment or for the time that we feel worthy or we feel ready. I think there are the three words. I say this now with great humility because I've certainly been in this situation where I felt like I wanted to go do something, but I didn't feel like I was ready. And then I went out and for the past 10 years, I've been studying some of the most extraordinary people on the planet, and people who have changed, I think, the world around them. And they all had one thing in common, which is that they were not ready to do what they did. Like three friends from design school, not ready to start Airbnb. Two bagel shop owners, not ready to become Ben and Jerry's. Malala Yousafzai wasn't ready to start speaking out against the Taliban, right? But they all did something, which is that they decided to take action, and then they let courage and readiness catch up along the way, right? So instead of waiting for courage to take action, you're taking action and you're letting courage catch up along the way. Stephen King, who is the author, said that it's always scariest before you start. And I think that's true. Like in every single situation, I started off as an IT consultant in Detroit, computer programmer, and I took a leap to law, and then from law I went to product management. From product management I went to entrepreneurship. From entrepreneurship I went to writing and being an author. And in every single one of those steps, I never felt quite ready. I always felt like, God, why me? I'm not capable of this. And for a long time, I felt like, gosh, I'm the only one who feels that way. But then after interviewing and studying all these people and sort of having them wind the clock back on their career, going back to their moments, I start to realize that, like, gosh, this is actually much more the norm than anything else. So if you're listening right now and you feel like there's something that you want, something you really desire, but you're sort of waiting for that moment where you feel worthy enough or certain enough to do that, what I would encourage you to do is to play what I call the game of now. And instead of waiting for courage to lead you to action, consider taking action and letting courage catch up along the way.
Totally. And I think, Sunil, this is kind of my domain you're getting into. I think definitely courage and confidence comes after the action. Like a lot of people think it's the other way around, that somebody's born. It's like, of course he's confident at playing soccer. He's been doing it so long. But the thing is, there was a time where he started playing soccer. He didn't know anything. You know what I mean? So it always comes before.
It always
You
comes before.
mentioned a lot about, people that you interviewed, people that you studied. Talk to me about Backable and what it means to be backable.
So, to be backable means that you're able to inspire people to take action. And oftentimes, what that means is to inspire people to believe in an idea that you have. One of my favorite quotes comes from Pablo Picasso, who said that the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And I wrote Backable because we have these gifts, but how do we give them away? And oftentimes the path to doing that involves other people. Like even now in the age of AI, where we're seeing, one person startups that are, scaling to, huge valuations, even in that world, we still don't do it alone. There are partners, there are people, we're still very much, and I think we still will very much be a social society where we are trading ideas and getting behind concepts that we believe in. And, to understand how to do that is really important. And it's not something that I was naturally good at. So when I started my first company, Rise, or the first company that worked, I should say, Rise, I was out there trying to raise money, and I was getting rejected by investor after investor after investor. And I was like, wow, this is a good idea. It's a healthcare company that I think the world really needs right now. I was really trying to crack the nut on preventative health, which was like, I think a really important problem to solve. I'd seen my own dad really struggle with his health. He had an emergency bypass surgery. We nearly lost him that day, and I'm like, this could have really helped him. And so I really believed in it, but I didn't have the skills to get other people to believe in it. And so over time, I started to realize that there's a real art and a science behind inspiring people to believe in your ideas. And after understanding how that game was played, I wanted to make sure that other people knew how to play it as well.
100%. Are you familiar with Naval Ravikant's idea of the four different types of luck?
I'm familiar with Naval, but I'm not familiar with his four different types of luck.
So I'll give you the TLDR. Pretty much, luck is controllable, and a lot of people think that luck is this thing where it's like, oh, you find $100 bill on the street, and same thing. It's like, oh, you know what? Of course you're lucky. You talk to Bill Gates, like all this different stuff, right? People always attribute luck to everything, but what I found to realize, and I've been trying to tell a lot of people, and I mean, Naval Ravikant said this. Is not like I'm the first person to think about this, but luck is something that is controllable. And like for example, for me, I've been able to get amazing guests just like you on this show. And yeah, it's lucky that you're on the show for me, but at the same time, there's a lot of different factors that play into it, right? And something that I'm wondering is using this idea of luck when you talk about being backable and having people take a chance on you. A lot of people will think, okay, Sunil took a chance on me, I got lucky. But how does that play in? Like, how can you control the luck and maximize the potential for getting this opportunity?
Well, I think the first thing is that if you don't put yourself out there, then you don't have a chance at luck, right? Because oftentimes what we find is that luck will follow action. And oftentimes when
I
we
love
look
that.
at
I love that.
people who are lucky, um, I think, and we marvel at their sort of good fortune. Um, we also have to rewind the clock back to the story of the fact that they decided to move, right? They decided to take an action. Um, and I think we tend to discount people who are, seemingly unprepared, or, they didn't necessarily pay their dues. And we say, well, they just got lucky. there's plays into it a little bit, but they also took action. They took action. Um, the game that you and I are talking about right now, Elon. Action leading to courage. This is not new. This is as old as time itself. But Teddy Roosevelt was one time asked, like, hey, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, can you do something? Then you should say, yes, I can, and then go figure out how. Right? Now that go figure out how is really important, right? Because sometimes people will just try to fake it till they make it, right? Which is like they'll literally say, yes, I can, and then they'll just kind of pretend. That's not the game of now. The game of now is, yes, I can, and then I'm going to go work my ass off to figure out exactly how to do it. I'm going to go learn. I'm going to learn hard. That's the game of now, right? So, in no way, I think that sometimes when we sort of look at these stories that seem to be covered in good fortune, we miss the fact that there's just so much hard work that's associated with it. My big brother is he's a medical journalist, and he's on CNN, and he got this job 20 years ago. His name's Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and at that time he had no journalism experience, no on-air experience, but he got the job, right? And part of the reason that he got the job is because he went into this interview. He performed really well in the interview. They could tell that he was sincere. Like you could tell, like he knew his stuff. But what people often miss about his story is that, like, that was all a trial. When CNN gave him the job, it was very much like an opportunity to prove himself, and he did, and he worked his ass off, and that's how he grew this 20+ year career as, now CNN's, one of their longest serving sort of journalists. It took a lot of work, right? But oftentimes people will look at that story and see a lot of luck. So I think whenever you're looking at a story that you feel like is lucky, just rewind the clock a little bit to that sort of moment of origin and say, what was it that it took for that story to get started? And I think that's always something that we can look to for inspiration.
Sure. You've interviewed many people who are backable. What was your biggest lesson from them?
Well, part of it is that I was looking for a pattern. I was looking for a pattern in speaking, right? So when I first started writing the book, I thought to myself, okay, I was almost thinking about, like, what kind of hand gestures do I need to be using? What kind of inflection of tone do I need to be using? How do I need to articulate my voice? And what I realized is that all of those questions were the wrong questions to be asking, because it's not about that. If you look at backable people who we're inspired by, people who we decide to take action because they have convinced us to take action, they have a variety of speaking styles. There's a whole range. There are those who are extremely quiet. There are those who are very, very dynamic. But there's no pattern. Even if you go back to Steve Jobs' launch of the iPhone, which is considered to be, one of the greatest product launches of all time, just go back and watch that speech again. It's deeply inspiring, but it's not what, like, a communications teacher might say was a great speech, right? He uses the word like, I think I counted, it was like over 70 times in that speech. He looks at his feet a lot. He kind of drifts in and then kind of drifts back. It's not, again, not like, communication 101 sort of standards, but it's a very powerful talk. The point being that we all have our own style, and what is up to you is to figure out what your style is and really to lean into that. So instead of trying to be something that you're not, really kind of hone in on what is my style. And another way to think about this, and I think this is probably, of all the things that I shared in that book, probably the thing that stuck out to me the most, was that you want to speak to express and not to impress. Because when we're trying to impress people, we actually become a lot less impressive. I see it myself, and by the way, I'm not, like, immune to this. Even when I'm doing a podcast interview, sometimes I sort of slip into impress mode, or I'm trying to impress the host, and I'm like, wait a second, that's like the word. I can feel myself getting less articulate as I do that. The more that I focus on expressing rather than impressing, that is when the best stuff comes out. And I found that to be the case over and over again in the room, whether it's an interview, whether it's a presentation, whether it's a pitch for, fundraising. When people are just really expressing instead of trying to impress, that's when their best stuff comes out.
Yeah, I will say, Suneel, you are both expressing and impressing me.
Oh, that's really nice. Thanks, man.
You were on Simon Sinek's podcast. I love it. He's a big inspiration of mine. Big
Yeah.
congratulations to you. And you mentioned the idea of Dharma, and you defined it as that which sustains. You said it's the fire in you that you don't need to keep reigniting. It's always going. It's always going.
Yeah.
Do you think that people need to succeed before they can get their dharma as like a positive reinforcement for success, or do you think it works the other way around, where you have your dharma and then you find success?
I think it's the other way around. I think you have your dharma. You have something that matters to you. Um, it's calling you to adventure. And it's calling you to a path, right? Yeah. And it doesn't have to be necessarily something that's, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you want to go create a space travel company. It can be whatever it is that's motivating you to take action, right? You want to go do something. I think one of the clearest signs of this is energy more than anything else. There are all sorts of theories out there about how to find your purpose, and I think that to me the clearest signal is energy. Do you feel it? One of the things I have people do when they come to me and they say, "Hey, I don't know what my purpose is in life." And it's very daunting for me to sort of think about, gosh, I have a purpose and I need to go find it. It can feel very sort of big and almost something that you can't necessarily touch, right? It's kind of out of reach in some ways. And I think the way to make it really practical is just to start keeping a notebook with you and start to make note of all of the moments where you feel a bit of an energetic hit, right? Like you just feel something. And when you feel something like, oh, I really enjoyed that conversation, or I really enjoyed this part of a lecture, or it kind of lit me up, or I really there was something about when I was sitting down at my desk and I was working on this one thing, I could feel that vibrancy come into me. You want to make note of those little things, because if you make enough of those little notes, what will happen over time is you'll start to be able to look at your master list and you'll start to see patterns. Even if you do this for 1 week and you make a point of every day, every time something lights me up, I'm just going to jot it down, no matter what it is. It doesn't have to be work related. It doesn't have to be school related. It could be anything. But I'm gonna write it down. If you do that a few times a day, by the end of a week, you're going to have somewhere around 30-ish data points. And you're going to be able to look back at that list and you're going to start to see patterns. This is when I, have an accountant that comes to me and says, hey, I'm not sure what to do with my life. And I have him do this exercise. And he looks back at that list and he says, my gosh, I really love art. And I've spent all this time as an accountant, but what I really love design. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he needs to go quit his job now and become a designer or become a painter. But what he can start to do is he can start to bring more of those elements into his life, right? You can start to bring more of your Dharma into your life. So that's the way to begin, is follow the energy.
Suneel, dude, you are such an inspiration. You're amazing. Where can people find your stuff at?
Oh, just go to my website. Thank you, first of all. That means a lot. And just go to my website. It's suneelgupta.com. And there's a bunch of stuff out there for you. And if you like it, feel free to sign up for my newsletter or follow me on Instagram, and we'll have a chance to connect.